all everybody's been talking about this summer is the Montreal Canadiens second line center situation. Who's it going to be? Is Oliver Kapanen going to step up? Is Kirby Dach finally going to grab the position by the horns? Could Alex Newhook play there? Does Kent Hughes eventually go out and trade for somebody to play as a second line center? All those things are legitimate questions. But I think we might be focusing only on half of the Ivan Demidov equation. Because if the goal is to maximize Demidov, I'm not sure the center is even the most important line mate. The winger might be. And after what we saw last season, I think there's a pretty strong argument that Montreal has already discovered the type of line Demidov needs. Maybe even the exact line. Now, Demidov finished his rookie season with 19 goals, 43 assists for 62 points in all 82 games, leading every NHL rookie in points and assists. And another 9 points came to him in 19 playoff games. That's an outstanding rookie season by any measurement. But watching him, I think we all saw the same thing. I think there were a lot of points left on the table. There were shifts where Demidov created something out of nothing and nobody was where he expected them to be. There were other times where passes went through the seams that teammates weren't even ready for. Other times there were entries where Demidov gained the zone only to discover that he was always going to have to go retrieve the puck, create the play, and finish the whole damn thing by himself. So on today's season preview, forget about simply asking who is Montreal's second line center. I want to ask something much more specific. Who's the best center for Ivan Demidov? And maybe more importantly, who's the best winger for Ivan Demidov? Because those are not necessarily the same question as who are Montreal's 3 best available forwards. So let's talk some puck. Now, before we get into the whole Demidov situation and what I think is going on, there are a couple of news items that came up today that we need to talk about. First things first is the fact that the Canadiens announced all their theme games. And honestly, when I take a look at this calendar, the only thing that really stands out to me is not only November 10th, which is going to be Carey Price night, but also December 8th, which is wearable flag giveaway night. Now, put it in the comments if you know this, because I don't. What the hell is a wearable flag? Is it a cape? I don't understand. Call it cape night. I don't know, but, other than that, you go up and down this list. Between you and me, I really don't give a rat's ass about Lunar New Year. Really? Obviously, there are important things out here like Military Appreciation Night, Hockey Fights Cancer Night. You've got Celebrating Black Excellence in February. First People's Celebration, that's very important. Pride Night, of course, always important. But other than those particular nights that we have on a yearly basis, what have the Canadiens done that's so different to draw people in? I mean, people are paying top dollar for tickets to go see a hockey game, right? Don't you think they should get some kind of variety instead of this, vanilla lineup of theme games? That's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise, but it is what it is as far as I'm concerned. Now, going back to November 10th and Carey Price night, it's been announced that the Canadiens obviously are going to put Carey Price in the Ring of Honor. Now, it's the right thing to do, obviously, but there was something else that came up in this discussion and what I saw online that I found very interesting is a cool question. Now, we've talked about retiring Carey Price's number, and that thing is split 50-50. I don't care what people think or say. When you look at the pros and cons on both sides, and you look at the opinions on both sides of the ledger, it's pretty dead even. So, is it going to happen? Probably not. Not right away anyways, but at the end of the day, you're talking about a guy outside of getting his contract traded who spent his entire career with the Montreal Canadiens. That's not something you see very often. You know what I mean? Even Larry Robinson left to go to LA. Patrick Waugh went to the Avalanche. There are a lot of players who left Montreal after their days. Hell, even Serge Savard went to go play for the Winnipeg Jets. There are a lot of guys that left. So 1 year on a contract where he couldn't play anyway, I don't care. It's not part of the conversation. It's not part of the argument. 15 years wearing the Bleu Blanc Rouge. He's getting the Ring of Honor. In my opinion, because I'm a goalie and I'm biased, obviously, I think he deserves to be in the rafters with his number retired simply because he was a generational talent and the best goalie of his generation. He represented the Canadiens really well. So that's my opinion. You could argue all you want. That's not what this episode is all about. We've done it before. That being said, the Ring of Honor, probably the best place for him to be anyway. But that's going to happen on November 10th. The other news that came out, which of course, caught me by surprise a little bit, is because rookie camp hasn't even started yet. And the Canadiens announced that Alexei Vlasov is going to be on the Canadiens rookie camp roster. Now, Vlasov spent last season with the Victoriaville Tigers, as you see here, where he got 80 points in 64 games. And despite the fact that he was a minus 22, I mean, those are pretty solid numbers. It just means his team was crap defensively. But at the end of the day, even in the playoffs, 4 points in 4 games, the kid's got talent. A little bit smaller, 5'9", 176 pounds, 18 years old, but those are numbers you can't ignore. So for the Canadiens to go out and actually invite him to rookie camp, given how they feel about Russian players to boot, I think it's the right move. Kid's a homegrown talent, played for the Victoriaville Tigers, coming from the Q. If he makes the Canadiens, great. If he doesn't, well, he goes back to junior. But at the end of the day, I like this player, and I think he's got a lot to bring to the table if he moves forward. Now, obviously, the Canadiens may want to sign him to an entry-level deal just to maintain his rights if he does well in rookie camp. We'll see whether or not that happens. But by and large, when you take a look at his numbers, I mean, they speak for themselves. Whether or not his team is better defensively next year remains to be seen. But in terms of offense, there's no doubt this kid can bring it. We'll see if he can bring a little bit of that magic to Canadiens rookie camp later this August. Now, let's get back to what we were talking about in terms of Ivan Demidov, because before we start assigning players to his line, we have to understand what Demidov does, because building a line isn't fantasy hockey, right? You don't just take 3 players with the highest offensive ratings and throw them together on a single line. Players need complementary skills, and Demidov already is the type of player you want driving the creativity on his line. He wants the puck. He wants defenders moving. He wants the attack to come through layers. He manipulates coverage. He delays. He changes directions. He draws defenders towards him and attacks the space that they just abandoned. So when I look at him, I don't necessarily want another player beside him who also needs the puck for 5 seconds before making something happen. Demidov needs 3 specific things. First, somebody who's going to go and retrieve the pucks. If Ivan Demidov creates an entry and the puck gets pushed into the corner, he shouldn't be the one going to get it. Somebody has to go and get it back. Second, somebody who understands where the open space is going to appear. So that requires a player with a relatively high hockey IQ. Demidov's capable of finding players before defenders even recognize that the passing lane even exists. That means his line mates need to think ahead. Now, whether that means he talks to them before the game, they go over video, whatever. Nonetheless, the player needs to have a high hockey IQ. And the third thing Demidov needs is somebody that needs to shoot. Now, Demidov had 43 assists as a rookie. That tells you something. This guy's going to create scoring opportunities. And as I've said before, there are times where he's had the puck on his stick, and all I do is look at the TV and scream, "Shoot!" Obviously, I don't want to yell into the microphone, but you get what I mean. Now, the Canadiens need players around him who are comfortable letting him create and then finishing the play that he does create. That's why I'm convinced Montreal doesn't need some superstar puck-dominant second-line center to unlock Demidov, or to make that second line much more complete and dangerous so that it draws more attention from the opponent. They might need somebody much simpler, a center who connects the line, or a winger who does the dirty work required to let Demidov be Demidov. And this is where we start to talk about Oliver Kapanen, because he deserves considerably more respect than he's gotten recently, especially at the end of the season last year. He scored 22 goals as a rookie, phenomenal, and had 37 points in 82 games in his rookie year. Those aren't fantastic numbers, but they're not garbage numbers either. And he did that without being a traditional offensive second-line center. That's really important when you look at the grand scheme of things. Because normally when we talk about a 2C, we talk about someone who transports the puck up the ice, someone who distributes, drives the offense. But Demidov already does those things for his line from the wing. Kapanen, therefore, doesn't have to become Nick Suzuki, as an example. He needs to become the player who makes Demidov easier to play with, and Kapanen did something extremely valuable last season. He learned where to go. There were multiple examples of Demidov manipulating defenders and Kapanen simply finding open ice. Demidov creates, Kapanen arrives. Pass, shot, goal. That chemistry helped Kapanen reach 22 goals last year. He didn't do it all on his own. One analysis after the season specifically noted that Demidov set up a large portion of Kapanen's offense, but Kapanen deserved credit for repeatedly getting himself into the correct areas to receive those passes. That view of things matters so much because there's sometimes this idea that if Demidov is making Kapanen better, Kapanen therefore isn't good enough to play with Demidov. I think that's completely backwards. Okay, that's exactly what star players are supposed to do. Okay, the question isn't why would Oliver Kapanen score 22 goals if he wasn't with Ivan Demidov? The question is, can Oliver Kapanen score 25 or 30 with Ivan Demidov? Because that's the job. And there's a reason I like Kapanen there. He doesn't compete with Demidov for offensive control, right? Kapanen supports the play. He can defend, find soft ice, get into scoring areas, and he can allow Demidov to become the primary creator. That's valuable in terms of line construction. And I think it's a point that a lot of people miss. But there's also a legitimate counter-argument to this whole thing. Kapanen's season faded a little bit. He finished the regular season on a 10-game pointless streak and eventually found himself outside Montreal's playoff lineup after appearing in the first 4 postseason games. So can Montreal really enter a Stanley Cup season with Oliver Kapanen as their second-line center? Well, maybe. But there's an important distinction that has to be made. I'm not asking if Kapanen is the ideal NHL second-line center in a vacuum. I'm asking, is he an ideal center for Ivan Demidov? And those are two completely different questions. If Demidov becomes an 80-point winger and the third member of that line becomes a 60 to 70-point player, does Kapanen really need to be a traditional 60-point center? Maybe not. Maybe Montreal needs him to score 25 goals, defend, win pucks, and stay out of Demidov's way offensively. That could also work. Now, if we're talking about a theoretical upside, Kirby Dach is fascinating because physically, Dach gives Demidov things Kapanen doesn't. He's 6'4", protects the puck well, extends possession, operates below the goal line, and when he's playing confidently, he has enough skill to make plays in traffic. The idea is easy to understand. Demidov gains the zone, Dach gets possession down low. He protects the puck, Demidov disappears into open space, and suddenly the defense has a major problem. That thought process can really work. The Canadiens clearly saw the concept themselves. They experimented with Dach and Patrick Laine with Demidov heading into the 25-26 season. But here's the problem. Eventually, we need to see results. Dach finished last regular season with 8 goals and 7 assists for 15 points in just 37 games. Availability and consistency have been an issue for him. And more importantly, for this conversation, Dach can't become another player waiting for Demidov to create everything. If Dach wants the center position, I want to see him become the physical engine of that line, right? Win possession, protect possession, attack the middle, get to the net, create space for number 93. If Dach does that, well, then the ceiling for that line is enormous. But right now, Kapanen's shown real chemistry with Demidov, which is something that Dach simply hasn't done yet. And headed into camp, I give Kapanen my first look, and Dach has to take the job from him. That's the way I look at it. Now, the real question. Who plays left wing on that line? This is where the conversation becomes really interesting, because if we're strictly asking who's the best winger for Ivan Demidov, I don't think the answer is Alex Newhook. I don't think it's Zach Bolduc or Alexander Texier. My answer is Juraj Slafkovsky. And unlike some of the other possibilities, we actually have evidence. Slafkovsky spent more than 350 5-on-5 minutes with Demidov and Kapanen last year. The trio scored 25 goals and allowed only 18. The Slav, Kapanen, Demidov line was identified as Montreal's second most productive line combination of the season. At one point during a road trip, they outscored opponents 8-2 while controlling the underlying numbers. During another stretch, Slafkovsky, Kapanen, and Demidov produced 15 5-on-5 goals from December 1st through mid-January and controlled 75% of the expected goals in a game against Buffalo. That wasn't theoretical chemistry. It actually happened. And when you think about their skill sets, it also makes complete sense. Slafkovsky does the things Demidov shouldn't have to do every shift. He forechecks, retrieves, protects, battles, gets inside, creates traffic, wins possession back. And then, because Slafkovsky's offensive game is developed, he's also skilled enough to participate once Demidov creates something. Now, Slafkovsky finished last season with 30 goals and 73 points. That's not somebody you're asking to babysit Demidov. That's a legitimate offensive weapon to go along with him. But he attacks differently, and that's the key. Demidov attacks horizontally, where Slafkovsky plays a more vertical game. Demidov manipulates, Slafkovsky overwhelms. Demidov finds space. Slafkovsky, he creates it. That's why I love the combination, and I think the Canadiens discovered something last season that they shouldn't forget. But that begs the question, do you break up Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky? Because there's an obvious objection. And you guys are going to ask, Coach, you're breaking up the Suzuki, Caulfield, Slafkovsky line? After the season they just had, with Suzuki getting 101 points, Caulfield scoring 51 and producing 88, Slafkovsky with 73, why would you touch that? Well, it's a fair argument. But here's what makes this discussion so fascinating. When Suzuki and Caulfield played without Slafkovsky last season, the Canadiens still had significant success. Suzuki and Caulfield played just under 475 on 5 minutes without Slafkovsky and outscored opponents 34-20 while controlling roughly 63% of the expected goals. Read that again. Taking Slafkovsky off the line didn't destroy Suzuki and Caulfield. They were still dominant, which creates an interesting possibility. Maybe the Canadiens become harder to defend by spreading the talent out. Instead of Slafkovsky, Suzuki, and Caulfield, then hoping that Demidov manufactures offense with whoever's left, what if you create two legitimate first-line quality combinations? You have Suzuki and Caulfield driving one, Demidov and Slafkovsky driving another. Now opposing coaches have a problem. And here's the thing in this thinking where you guys are going to look at me and say I'm nuts. For years, we talked about coaches that looked at their teams in terms of duos and not trios, right? The third player, I wouldn't necessarily call him complementary, but he was interchangeable. On one night, you could have a guy that skates well, so you have better transition against teams that don't check hard enough. On other nights, you have a guy in there who's a grinder who goes in and digs pucks out of the corner. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Canadiens can't do that, because they have players who have those abilities in terms of their actual role. But when you're looking at somebody who can create offense, defend, and dig pucks back, Slafkovsky is always going to be a better option for Demidov because he has all of those tools in his back pocket. Now, you have to ask yourself the question when you do all this stuff and you pair players up. Who gets the shutdown pair? Who gets the defensive center? And why are you matching against them? Or who are you matching against them? Even better. That's how Montreal can stop being a team with one superstar line and become a team with two lines capable of taking over a game. And that's what we're looking for here after all. But suppose Marty St. Louis doesn't want to separate Slafkovsky from Suzuki and Caulfield. My next choice on my list would be Alex Newhook. And I actually think Newhooks make more sense as Demidov's winger than as Demidov's center. Why? Simply one word: his speed. Demidov can slow the game down, Newhook can speed it up. That contrast can create problems more often than not. Newhook can attack open ice, stretch defenders, and get behind coverage, and he's got enough finishing ability to convert chances when they're presented to him. Despite missing significant time last season, Newhook produced 13 goals and 25 points in 42 games. And Montreal repeatedly returned to Newhook, Kapanen, and Demidov combination during the season. In March, all three contributed to a goal and an assist in a 4-1 win over Nashville. The Canadiens also reunited that trio during the playoffs. So if Montreal says we're not touching Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky, fine. Then my starting second line would be Newhook, Kapanen, and Demidov. Give them training camp. Give him the whole preseason for that matter. Then give him enough regular season runway to determine whether the chemistry can reach another level than it did last season. And then the wild card in all of this is Zach Bolduc. Because conceptually, I like the idea. Because Bolduc brings something every great playmaker wants. Somebody with a shooting mentality. Demidov wants players ready to finish. Bolduc wants to finish. So that can work. He also brings more physicality than Newhook and has shown at times that he can attack from scoring areas rather than constantly needing the puck on his stick. But his first season in Montreal was a little bit inconsistent. Not necessarily all his fault. I mean, he did get 12 goals and 30 points in 78 games, but between you and me, he's bounced around the lineup a lot. We saw flashes. And there were stretches where he looked like a legitimate top six forward. And then there were stretches, of course, as I mentioned, he completely disappeared because he played on lines that really weren't conducive to creating any type of sustained offense. So Bolduc Demidov is something I absolutely want Marty St. Louis to experiment with. But I wouldn't hand Bolduc the position. I'd want him to earn it. The interesting upside combination would be Bolduc, Dach, Demidov. That might be Montreal's highest variance line. Size, skill, shot, puck protection, creativity. It would actually have a lot of the tools in the back pocket of the first line. You look at all those 5 things, size, skill, shot, puck protection, and creativity. Well, when you take a look at Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky, they have that in abundance as well. If Dach and Bolduc can reach their ceilings, that line could be fantastic. But there's considerably more unknowns when you're looking at that line than there are with guys like Kapanen and Newhook. And then we get to some of the other options. Alexander Texier, there's skill there. There's speed. He can make plays. But I don't think it provides enough complementary ingredients that I want next to Demidov to make him a preferred option. Josh Anderson might be interesting in short bursts. Put Anderson on that line when you want somebody hunting pucks and driving the crease. But over 82 games, I think the offensive processing gap might become a little bit of a limitation. Philip Danault, excellent player, excellent defensive conscience, could absolutely stabilize Demidov in certain matchups, but if the objective is maximizing Demidov's offensive skill, I don't think Danault's the answer to that. And the same goes for Jake Evans. In fact, Montreal used Evans with Newhook and Demidov, during the playoffs. But his direct, intelligent style and face-off ability can help the line possess the puck, I should say. That's useful, but it's not a floor-raising move. We're looking for combinations that are going to raise the ceiling. Now, in terms of my rankings, here's where I'd actually rank the players I just talked about. In terms of centers, Philip Danault would be my number 5. Safe, smart, reliable, but not enough offensive upside for what we're trying to accomplish in this exercise. Number 4, Jake Evans. Similar argument, extremely useful NHL player, can stabilize the line. Not my choice for unlocking Demidov's superstar ceiling, despite the fact that he has a little bit more of an offensive upside than Danault. Number 3 would be Alex Newhook. I like his speed behind Demidov. I like him even more on the wing. Number 2, Kirby Dach. Potentially the best option. Maybe even clearly the best option if everything clicks. But we've been talking about if everything clicks with Kirby Dach for a very long time. This season he has to prove it. And number 1 at center would be Oliver Kapanen. Not because he's Montreal's best second-line center, but because right now I think he understands how to play with Demidov better than any other center on the roster. And that's the important factor here in terms of that hockey IQ. Wingers for Demidov, number 5, Josh Anderson. He'd be a useful situational option. Number 4, Alexander Texier. Skilled enough, but I'm not convinced the complementary game is ideal for Demidov. Zach Bolduc would be my number 3. Huge upside because of his shot. That experiment is something I want to see more of to see how it turns out. Alex Newhook, probably the most practical answer at number 2. Fast, dangerous off the rush, enough finishing ability, and already familiar with Demidov. And my number 1 pick isn't even particularly close to the rest of them. Juraj Slafkovsky. He's already demonstrated he can make that line work, whether he's driving the line or whether it's Demidov. Now, Heading into Canadiens training camp, I want Marty St. Louis experimenting with 3 different line combinations. Option number 1 would be to maximize Ivan Demidov. Slafkovsky, Kapanen, Demidov. That's my number 1 line if the singular objective would be, how do we get everything possible out of Demidov? Period. We already know it works. You have retrieval, size, playmaking, finishing, defensive responsibility, and complementary skill sets. My second option, maximize the entire roster. Newhook, Kapanen, Demidov. And this is probably where I start opening night. Why? Well, because it leaves Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky intact. You give Demidov speed with Newhook, and you give him positional intelligence with Kapanen. And you maintain Montreal's established first line. So it's a win-win all the way around. And if it works, perfect. Don't touch anything. My third option? Well, this one would be my ceiling bet. Bolduc, Dach, Demidov. This is my mad scientist combination. I'm testing this throughout camp. I'm testing it in the preseason. Because if Dach can rediscover his game and Bolduc can establish himself as a consistent shooter, all the tools fit. Maybe Demidov unlocks both of them. But I need to see if it can be trusted before I decide to do it in the regular season. So after spending the entire offseason talking about Montreal needing to find Ivan Demidov a second-line center, I think we need to reconsider the question. And I think it's already been reconsidered because a lot of people are talking about the second line as a whole now. Maybe, just maybe, because Demidov doesn't need a center who creates offense for him. Maybe Demidov is the creator. And what he actually needs is a center capable of supporting him and a winger capable of turning possession into sustained offensive zone pressure. And that's why today, my best center for Ivan Demidov is Oliver Kapanen. And my best winger, Juraj Slafkovsky. That doesn't mean Slafkovsky should permanently leave Suzuki and Caulfield. Not necessarily. For overall roster balance, I'd probably begin the season with Newhook, Kapanen, and Demidov. But I wouldn't keep Slafkovsky, Kapanen, and Demidov. I would keep them ready to go. Because we've already seen what happens when those 3 get rolling. And if Montreal reaches a point where the second line isn't producing enough, I'm not immediately starting to trade assets for a center. I'm not immediately blaming Oliver Kapanen. The first thing I'm doing is putting Juraj Slafkovsky back with Ivan Demidov, because maybe the Canadiens already found the combination that unlocks number 93. They just haven't decided how often they're willing to use it on a consistent basis. And that brings us to the question I want to ask you guys to answer in the comments. If your only objective is to maximize Ivan Demidov, who are you putting beside him? Is it Slafkovsky, Kapanen? Newhook, Kapanen? Is it Bolduc and Dach? Or are you breaking the emergency glass and putting Demidov beside Nick Suzuki maybe? Let me know. If you enjoy Canadiens discussion, where we're actually digging beyond the obvious questions, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because that's all we do here. I'm Coach K. This is PuckTalk Montreal. Thanks for watching, and as always, remember, keep your skates down, stick on the ice. You know it. Go Habs, go.